To wrap up this course, let's add the option for users to disable two-factor authentication for their accounts. We are going to have a button next to the recovery codes button, which will be used to disable two-factor authentication. This will be similar to the button for regenerating recovery codes. So to save us some typing, I'm going to copy that. Then this will submit to the two-factor authentication controller and a destroy method on the controller. I'll be using method spoofing for this form, so we need to add the necessary query string. Since this route is not going to accept any parameters, we are going to set the second argument to null. Then the third argument is where we'll define the query string, and we'll set the underscore method property to delete. Then for the button, we don't need to wrap it in a div because we're only going to have just that button in the form. Then the text is going to be disable two-factor authentication. Next, let's define the route. As mentioned, the route is going to be a delete route, and the pattern is going to be /settings/two-factor auth. Since we are prefixing everything in this group with that, so that is why I am using just / here. And the controller is going to be this, then a destroy method on the controller. For method spoofing to work, we need to first enable it inside the app config by setting allow method spoofing to true. Now we can add the destroy method on the controller. Public async destroy. Then we're going to pull in auth, session, and response from the context. All we have to do to disable two-factor authentication is to set the appropriate columns to null. That is, the two-factor secret, the two-factor recovery codes, and the two-factor confirmed at columns to null. Await auth user merge because we want to update some fields. So we set the two-factor secret to null. Same thing for the two-factor recovery codes. Then lastly, two-factor confirmed at to null as well. Then we'll persist the change. I'm going to save to reformat. We have disabled two-factor authentication. We need to display an appropriate message. Then lastly, we can redirect the user to the settings page. So that is all we have to do to disable two-factor authentication. We can take it further by enforcing the user to enter the authentication code from their authenticator app, which will serve as an extra security layer to ensure that the user of the account is the one indeed disabling two-factor authentication on the account. But I'm going to leave that as a challenge for you to do. And as always, if you need help regarding that, you can drop a comment in the comment section. Next, let's try this in the browser to ensure that it is working as expected. I'm going to disable two-factor authentication for this account by clicking on the disable two-factor authentication button. And as you expect, we got the appropriate message, and now two-factor authentication has been disabled on the account, and we now have the option to re-enable it. And if we take a look at the database, we should see that those columns have been set to null. So that brings us to the end of this course, and by now, you should be able to effectively implement two-factor authentication in AdonisJS.